I feel that so much of what children learn in school is going to be completely irrelevant by the time they leave school. I always assumed that I would just go ahead with schooling, kind of everything quite conventionally, even though I was brought up not necessarily in the most conventional style. She went to a Montessori nursery, and then we met her teacher, or the woman who would have been her teacher. She would be spending more time with my child than me, and I didn't know anything about her religious beliefs. I didn't know anything about her background.
Isn't it like a very scary thing to uncover? Because the whole world and his wife will tell you that you're a crazy person if you don't vaccinate your child, if you don't send them to school, if you don't do this, if you don't do that. It's almost like I would be scared.
I feel like we just take what we're told to take and eat what we're told to eat without question. And it's really liberating when you kind of can take control of that.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of A Millennial Mind. Today, I'm so excited to introduce you to my next guest, where we talk about the taboo of homeschooling, your diet, the schooling system, and so much more. If you haven't already, I'd be so grateful if you could press the follow and like button wherever you're watching this podcast. It would mean the world to me. I'm really excited to share this episode with you, so let's get into it. Coral.
Hello.
How are you?
Very good, my love. How are you?
I'm very happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. Honestly, I feel like I need to say this quickly, but it was so funny because when I saw that you were following me, I then saw a DM in my inbox from you, and I ran into my mum and I was like, oh my God, I feel like she's going to ask me on her podcast. And then when I opened the message and saw that you had, I was so happy. So yeah, it's a real honour.
That's so sweet. Well, I saw your reels with your kids and I was like, your kids are so cute, but also just the reel that you did, when we'll talk about it, was about homeschooling. Yeah. And I was like, this is so funny. And then I was like stalking all of your things. And I was just like, this is such an interesting topic that I feel no one is talking about. Mm-hmm. There are so many misconceptions around homeschooling. And I have a lot of people that listen to the podcast who are thinking about that decision, wondering what to do. But we'll get into that. But for people who don't know who you are, tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Coral, and I'm a 37-year-old homeschooling mum of two. I'm also a content creator on Instagram. And yeah, that's me.
So how did you kind of get into content creation? Because I feel like you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, so I actually had an organic juice bar before I started my Instagram, but that was when Instagram first kind of came out. And I'd had my eldest daughter, and then I had a friend who was a content creator, and she told me what she got paid to post a picture on Instagram, and I was like, I'm going to do that, or I'm going to try that. And then we had our juice bar at the time, and then after I had my second child, I kind of slowly took a step back from the juice bar, and my business partner took over, and then it just kind of blended into my full-time job, but really gradually, which has been nice. And I just love the flexibility of it. I'm really lucky.
Well, I'm obsessed with your style and everything that you do. Oh. And I want to kind of talk about your diet as well, because I think that's a really interesting thing.
I agree.
But one of the things I want to talk about is obviously your parenting style.
Okay.
Before you had kids, were you very conscious around, you wanted to homeschool, you wanted to be this kind of parent, you wanted to be because you're a conscious parent as well, right?
Yeah.
Were you conscious of that? Because I do feel now everyone's very aware of that before they have kids.
No, is the answer. I wasn't at all. In fact, quite the opposite. I always assumed that I would just go ahead with schooling, kind of everything quite conventionally, even though I was brought up not necessarily in the most conventional style. I just assumed that I would raise my children in the kind of standard way, I suppose.
What do you mean by you're not conventional style?
When I was growing up. So when we first moved to Brighton, I lived in a Buddhist community with my parents. So I wasn't kind of in an average.
Wow.
Yeah.
What does that mean? You lived in a Buddhist community?
So it was literally in a Buddhist centre. So my dad was quite a strict Buddhist and was for the last 20 years of his life. Wow. And so when we first moved to Brighton, we literally lived in a Buddhist community.
And what did that entail?
So as a child, I just found it weird. So I was like, I just want to fit in with everybody else. But to us, it didn't make that much kind of difference. But to them, they kind of attended classes and yeah.
And did you go to school as well?
Yes, I went to a regular school.
Got it. And the Buddhist community you'd come home to every night.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. All my friends thought it was really cool because they'd go in and they'd be all these massive statues and everything. And I just found it, I just wanted to be normal and fit in.
Yeah.
You know? And we'd moved from Manchester as well. So I already felt like a bit of an outsider because I had a northern accent. And then I moved down to Brighton and I was like living in this weird building.
And how was that?
But
then?
now I'm really grateful that I had that experience.
So what do you mean by that? So like, how was it? How did you start to appreciate it? Tell me a bit about that. That's so interesting.
So I think now I'm just grateful because I was made to sit in some classes. I feel like the teachings have gone in on a more subtle level rather than me finding and kind of that path as an adult. They're just kind of ingrained in me, a lot of the Buddhist teachings. So trying to be compassionate to others, you know, not killing anything. There's so many kind of underlying teachings that I just feel like I have in me now as an adult.
That's so amazing. But as a child, I know what you mean. I think as a child, you're a bit, if you're like too religious or you're too into something that isn't something that you have chosen to do.
Exactly.
Like your parents are like, it's just a way of life. You feel conscious about it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that applies to so many things. I know a lot of people who are children of immigrants and they feel a bit embarrassed about their like religion and their culture.
Yeah.
As you grow older, you're like, I love
so
it.
Proud of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Okay. So you weren't aware of kind of the parent you wanted to be.
No.
So talk to me. How did that process happen?
It all happened really gradually and naturally.
Okay.
So I had my daughter, and originally I thought I want to have an epidural. I was like, just give me all the pain relief. And then I remember speaking to somebody and she planted this seed in my head that you don't have to have all the medication, and the women would have naturally given birth without pain relief. That's how we've done it since forever. And
true.
Yeah. And I always just assumed that that's what you did. You just, you know, take all the drugs so you don't feel anything. And so that planted the seed in my head that, okay, I don't actually have to do everything the conventional way when, you know, with regards to giving birth. So I did that. I didn't have any pain relief. And then when my daughter was born, that literally opened up the floodgates to parenting. All of a sudden, I started reading into, you know, things about vaccinations and all these different topics, which I then started to question the kind of conventional system, and that kind of opened up the doors, I would say.
Talk to me about that. I know nothing about this. So isn't it like a very scary thing to uncover? Because the whole world and his wife will tell you that you're a crazy person if you don't vaccinate your child, if you don't send them to school, if you don't do this, if you don't do that. It's almost like I would be scared.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, sometimes I feel a little bit uncomfortable talking about it.
Really?
Yeah, because one, I'm always aware that I don't want to plant a seed in somebody else's head and then they make a decision which they
Based
might
on
regret.
you.
You have to be really careful because I'm not a doctor, so I can't advise you on what to do with the health of your child. I will say what I have done, but you have to do your own research.
For sure.
You know?
For sure.
And I think that with everything with regards to parenting, I'll say, you know, I'll show what we do, but I'm not going to tell you what to do with your child.
Yeah, because people get very offended, actually, don't they, in the comments, as we'll talk about. Okay, so you went into this floodgates, and okay, I want to talk about this idea, because you just said this, which is so obvious, but very interesting how we all believe that women have to have pain relief when they give birth.
Yeah.
So you were okay?
I mean...
It was painful, obviously.
It's painful, but at the same time, all that kept going on in my head was that we are made to do this. It's like my body can cope, and it's extremely animalistic, but at the same time, it's really powerful to just let your body do what it's supposed to do.
You're so right, actually. I never thought about that. But why were you against taking the medicine? Is it because you thought it was bad for you, or it was just more like empowering for you?
I think a bit of both, to be honest. I mean, even when I went in to give birth to my second daughter, it all happened very quickly and my contractions were really strong. They monitored them and she was like, you're going to need some pain relief. Otherwise, I don't think you're going to do this. And I was in a bit of a blur because it's quite a surreal, almost out of body experience. And she was like, you're going to need to take these tablets. And I was in a bit of a daze and I was like, okay. And then I said to Ali, my husband, can you just Google them quickly and tell me if there's any side effects? And it said that it can, the painkillers, so that it wasn't an epidural, but it said that it can affect the baby as well, and you can have hallucinogenic effects, and so can the child. And I was like, no way, I'll just do it. And I just did it.
Oh,
but at the same time, I feel like we just take what we're told to take and eat what we're told to eat without question. And it's really liberating when you kind of can take control of that.
This is so fascinating because you're so right. I think we're just told these things and we believe them.
Yeah.
The opposite side
And it's no
of that.
one's fault either. You know, I think there's a level of ignorance is bliss, but at the same time, why would we not trust these medications that we're being given? But it's really interesting when you start to delve deeper, it's also quite scary because it's the rabbit hole, isn't it? Once you open that book, you can't get out of it. It's like in the Matrix, isn't it? When you take the red pill or the blue pill, it's like once you know, you can't kind of go back on that, can you?
I think a lot of people will be like, that makes sense. Some people will say, not everything is a conspiracy theory. So we're not making these medicines to make you ill.
No.
Right?
No, and I don't believe that everybody has bad intentions. I don't look at there was periods, especially during that time, a few years ago, where I was questioning everything. But I think that is also a dangerous route. And that is a dangerous road to go down as well, where you question everything. So I just think you have to then use your common sense.
No, for sure.
As well.
But how did you trust yourself? Because I do think that, you know, when you're learning about things, you doubt yourself, right? And I do the same. When you're learning about something new, you just had your baby, you were very young, you were 26.
Yeah.
So you're learning about parenthood, you're learning about all of these different things, decided that I want to do certain things in a certain way. Was your husband also on board?
He wasn't not on board. I just kind of explained my reasons and he went along with it because I think it made sense to him.
Yeah.
Because again, I feel like a lot of the decisions I've made with regards to my children have felt extremely intuitive. So with regards to vaccination, with regards to not having pain relief, all these decisions go back to how we have evolved as humans and what we have needed and what we haven't needed. And when you break it down, all the decisions I've made, I think just make absolute sense.
And what about your parents and like your friends? Because that's also another thing. I feel that when you decide to raise your child in a certain way, obviously everyone's got an opinion for everything. Forget social media, but when you think about a close circle, if you're doing things differently, I know for me, if I was to do things differently, it would be my family and my friends that influence me the most, and I would have to convince the most. Because obviously when you have grandkids and you have like friends that people play with, it's a bit difficult, no?
It is. I was fortunate in that my dad was probably the person who planted the seed originally about not vaccinating. He was like, have you looked at the ingredients in these vaccinations? I've never thought to look at an ingredient of a vaccine, ever.
No, never.
So he was the one who planted the seed in my head, so he was fully on board.
Okay.
And my mum was too, so yeah, I was quite lucky.
And what about Ali's parents?
Yeah, they were quite open to it as well.
Okay, so you're quite lucky in that way.
Yeah, they're very open-minded family, yeah.
Because that's another thing that's quite difficult, because I think if you've got a family who've done things in a certain way for so long, then you're more like, am I going to be the first generation to do things differently, and what could that mean?
Yes.
And that's a little bit scary, I guess, because when you're young, I do think, and even, you know, when you're older, learning about something new is very challenging. So it can be a bit tricky to navigate, no?
Yeah, 100%.
What age did you decide to homeschool the kids? Did they go to nursery?
Yes. So Ava went to a Buddhist nursery, funnily enough, where they just kind of teach compassion and meditation and all these different practices from a very young age. And then she went to a Montessori nursery, which she was absolutely fine with. And then she was enrolled to go to a standard state school. So we went along for the open day and had a look around. And then we met her teacher, or the woman who would have been her teacher. And she wasn't particularly warm to either myself or Ava, which left me feeling a little bit uncomfortable. And then I started to question the thought that she would be spending more time with my child than me. And I didn't know anything about her religious beliefs. I didn't know anything about her background or her views on life or society. And I left feeling really uncomfortable. And then I spoke to my dad afterwards, and he was the one who said, you know, she doesn't have to go to school. And then I kind of looked into it more from there.
So what is homeschooling? Because I think there's a lot of confusion around this topic.
You can basically choose to homeschool your child in whatever style you want. You don't have to follow the national curriculum. If you don't want to, you can. You can unschool if you want to, which is kind of a way of thinking where everything we have been taught as adults or children as to how we should live our life, it's kind of the opposite of that. So there's a lot of people that I know who completely just don't teach their children anything, and they let their child lead the way.
How
So there's certain people who've never taught their children to read, and they've just picked it up, who don't, but they don't sit at a table and do any phonics or any teaching whatsoever. The child just intuitively wants to learn more about the world that we're in.
And they're okay.
Yeah.
How fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I don't personally follow that because there is a level of comparisonitis within me where I'm like, I don't know how I could leave my child for that long not knowing how to read. So, yeah. But there are certain people who do that.
And we figure it out, I guess, is what you're saying.
Yeah. It's interesting because in my second child, we didn't put much pressure on her learning to read at all. And all of a sudden, it honestly felt like in a few weeks, she was just reading menus, reading signs, reading everything. And it was like, how have you just put this together? Because we put hardly any emphasis on it at all. Whereas in my first, we would sit down at the table for hours and go over everything, which I find really interesting. Also, I find it sad that children have so much time that they have to spend just memorizing all these different things, whereas you just don't need to spend so much time kind of focused solely on academics when it just actually naturally comes to children at a certain age. So they say when kids hit around 7, it will naturally come to them. Before that, they're not actually ready.
No way.
Yeah.
But we're teaching children from age like 3 and 4.
It's almost pointless. Like it's not, but it doesn't go in. It's like they all just manage, their brains are at a certain level of development when they're about 7 years old that it all just works.
This is so interesting. So you decided to homeschool your first child, which is Ava.
Yeah.
And then how did that kind of happen? Were you working or you were doing content creation?
Content creation at the time. So again, I'm very lucky that I have a flexible job.
So talk to me about how that happened, because how old was she? So you decided...
She was 4. She would have been one of the oldest in the year. So she was 4, just about to turn 5 in the September.
Okay.
And it was in the August when I made the decision, so just before. And I just went onto Facebook, looked at loads of local groups and just joined loads of groups. We tried everything. We went to meetups and met all these different mums. And it's just a massive learning curve and a massive process, because also I didn't know anybody else at the time doing it. So it was quite scary.
Yeah, because imagine telling people as well, like, she's not going to school, I'm homeschooling her.
Yeah, but it's also quite exciting, and it's extremely liberating as well to say, I don't want to do what everyone else is doing. And it was really, it felt like such a challenge, but I was so ready for it.
That is, because it is a big commitment, isn't it, as a parent? And I think that's what puts people off as well sometimes, because it feels scary.
Yeah.
To be like, I'm responsible for teaching them everything that they know.
Yeah.
But I think you kind of are as a parent as well. But it's weird because it's almost that you feel that way.
Yeah. I think as well, as the years have gone on, I have now realised, who do I want to raise my child, myself or the government? And,
That's so... Okay, so you start... How did you start, like, putting a curriculum together?
A curriculum? I wouldn't even say we put a curriculum together. So we mainly put emphasis on the basics, so like maths and English. So my eldest has a tutor for maths and English. Sophie will start soon. And then everything else, we've kind of done a lot of learning led by her. So we don't really cover all the main topics, but we do in just not a conventional way. So she just learns by being out in the world, really.
So you basically just started doing maths and English with her, right?
Yeah.
Just like simple things like counting and letters and things like that.
Yeah.
What I'm really intrigued about, because I find this fascinating, is, in school, we have to learn so many random things. I was talking about this with someone the other day, is that the schooling system will teach you to memorize the periodic table and teach you nothing about finances or mental health or how you're feeling. And I don't remember anything, by the way. I remember nothing. Like, I don't know anything about history. This is one of always
my main points.
The other day, I was like, how many planets are there? I know people are going to execute me for that, no problem. But I was like, how many planets are there? I was like, what are the planets? And I was like, oh my God. Like, I don't know. And then I was like Googling it and I was like, and then one time I was like, how many countries are there in the world? And I'm like, these are just basic things that you think when you're in school, you'll learn about.
And now we carry around a calculator and an encyclopedia in our pocket. And to me, this is one of the main reasons that I homeschool my child, because I feel that so much of what children learn in school is going to be completely irrelevant by the time they leave school, because the world is changing so much.
So people's, I think, worry about homeschooling is how will they go to university, how will they get a job if they haven't covered all these things? Because do you have to have certain things to go to university, like A-level?
Yeah, you
like
would
that?
still, so you would still have to, and you can do the basics of that if you want to, but actually a lot of the big universities are very open to taking homeschool children because they think outside the box. Because if you think of the majority of children, they have learned in a linear way like every other child, whereas a homeschool child thinks completely differently.
I think you're convincing me, and I haven't even got kids. I'm like, wow, this is so amazing. So let's talk about things like the 11 plus. Would the kids do that?
They will, but not at this age. So I don't want them to have any pressure on them at this age. I don't think they should have any stress.
What about GCSEs?
Yes, I will get them to do GCSE just because I want them to have the options if they want to.
Yeah.
So if they ever do want to go to college or university, they have the choice, but they don't have to do as many as we did. They can just pick and choose a few that they want to do.
I think I did 10 or 11.
Yeah.
Do you have to do 10 or 11?
It depends where you want to go, I think, and what you want to study.
Wow.
So again, and there's so many different options now as well. So even in Brighton, there's a place where you can go and do 4, so the basics, and then you could learn. It's like they have horticulture and all these different agricultural subjects, so you can go and do that alongside. So it's a more kind of hands-on experience as well as doing the basics of GCSEs if you want to do that.
And from that, you can go to university and college and things like that.
Yeah.
Because I think that is people's.
Or you can get tutors and you can do all the GCSEs if you want to. But if you think the amount of time that is spent when you're in a classroom of 30 children, you're either being held back or you're being stretched too much, because there is no way that teacher can teach everybody at the same level when we're all so different. Mm-hmm. So if you have a tutor that's one-on-one, you can condense down what would be a day's teaching into, say, 2 hours.
But one thing people will say is it's a privileged thing, isn't it, to homeschool?
I know a lot of people who don't come from a privileged background. And I know that's because my children do have tutors, which is privileged.
Okay.
But there are lots of families that I'm very close to who do not come from a privileged situation.
How would that work? Because wouldn't you need to be at home and not be earning, technically, if you don't have a tutor?
Yeah, I don't know how they, they might be on certain benefits. I don't know personally. I don't ask them. But what I'm saying, I'm very aware that they're not.
Oh, okay. Because I guess you could also be flexible with your job, but you'd have to have flexibility. You'd have to have some income coming in.
Yeah, and I think a lot of parents just really make it work because they have so much belief or disbelief in the school system that they will do whatever it takes to make it work. I know some women who work nights and then they come home and spend all day teaching their children. Honestly, there's a mum that I know who was a nurse and she literally works all night and then teaches her children all day. I don't know how, honestly. She's incredible.
What are some of the problems people see in the schooling system at the moment? Because I've heard a lot of people say, I don't want a random person raising my child when I could do it myself.
I think that's one of the biggest reasons. I also think there are some agendas that are being pushed in schools with regards to gender that some people may not want their child to be exposed to. I could go on forever with faults of the school system, but also I think there's this thing within the school system which is like a one size fits all, and I think we're starting to realize that some children may be extremely talented when it comes to academics and some may not, and I think
the one size fits all is actually a very accurate depiction of the school system. When I was younger, I was never told that I was clever because I did not get straight A's. And that's what you think in school. If you don't get the top marks, if you're not in the top set, if you're not at the same level as your friends, you're stupid.
Yeah.
And then you're constantly put down.
And that stays with you for a long time.
Forever.
Yeah.
Until you realise, well, okay, maybe I wasn't the best in that, but I was really good in this. And then there's topics in school where people are like, these are the clever subjects, these are the dumb subjects, these are the hard topics, these are the soft topics. Or what did you get in your test?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, what did we, there's a constant comparison.
Yeah,
at all points. And teachers treat you differently. If you're smart in school, your teachers will treat you differently to if you're on the lower sets. And I remember that.
That's so sad, isn't it?
And it stays with you. So I think that's also another thing, right?
100%. And I think, that feeling of feeling stupid will stay with you. And again, like you said, until you get to a certain age. And I think we're also programmed to believe what success is. And now, I mean, you just said to me, you thought you were stupid. Whereas now I see you as an adult as an extremely successful person. You're driven, you're motivated, you're smashing it. Whereas growing up, you might have not had that self-belief. So it's like, what then changes in your head to make you believe that? But it's just such a shame that so many people will go through the rest of their lives believing that they can't do something. And I think the school system, unfortunately, really does that to a lot of people, because it's, as I said, it's like a one size fits all, and we're all so different, our talents.
So true. And I think that's the tricky thing now as well with what we're learning. Like you said, it's not really relevant sometimes in the next 10, 20 years.
No.
But it is.
And it's changing so rapidly, like even more so. So I really do believe, well, I mean, look at when we were growing up, we didn't have phones, did we? And it's like, look at, I don't know what's going to happen with technology in the next 10 years. Even ChatGPT.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how kids will get away with not using that nowadays.
Well, you can write essays on it.
Yeah, exactly.
In your dissertation.
So how irrelevant is the majority of what you're learning?
So do you think people judge you for your choice then, now?
With homeschooling?
Yeah.
I don't ever get much negative criticism for homeschooling. I get a lot of questions and more admiration, I think. But then I also, one of the negatives I got was after homeschooling, after the lockdowns, I got a lot of parents saying, oh, we had to homeschool. How do you do it? Whereas that situation of homeschooling is completely different to actual homeschooling. That was totally different for us. We don't sit at a table all day, every day. My kids are out in the world learning how to converse with adults and do real world stuff. Whereas in the lockdown, you're literally sat at a table with a computer. That's not real life, is it?
No, of course. And that was the other question I wanted to ask you. Is I think a lot of people were put off by homeschooling.
Yes.
Because of the lockdown. Yeah. Because you just thought, I have to be with my kids all day. I have to sit with them and teach them all of
You're
these
the
things.
teacher. Yeah.
How is that different? I know you're saying that you have to go out and stuff.
Yeah.
But how are you not the teacher?
Well, also my kids, so on a Monday and a Tuesday, they go to like a home ed school, which is run by ex-primary school teachers who left the system because they saw the kind of negative sides of it. And then they start, it's called the Imaginarium, and they go there on a Monday and a Tuesday. It's project-based learning. So they're around another group of kids, but it's all different ages. And they'll, like, for example, learn about where what was it, the question that they had? It was like, where does water come from on Earth? So then they'll learn about the water systems, they'll learn about water shortages, how to filter water, all these different...
Maybe I need to go to that.
Yeah, honestly, it's so interesting.
Wow.
So they're then exposed to that, but without any examinations, but then they'll fit in kind of academic stuff within that without it feeling pressurized. And also they're in a social environment as well.
It's so interesting that when I went to do a postgraduate degree, there was no marking system. And I thrived because I think in school, well, I went to Warwick and I studied law. I then went to go and work for E.ON, which is an energy company. And they sent me back to Warwick to the business school, except that it was about enjoying the learning. And when you think about something and you want to learn it, if you're thinking about what am I going to be tested on, what am I going to get grades on, you're memorizing.
Yeah.
You're not actually like exploring, like, how does this happen? You're not fascinated. All you're thinking about is, how am I going to be okay and survive this? Because you kind of taught that in school.
And it doesn't go in. And I always think as well, when you ask a question, you will remember the answer. When you're fed information, you don't absorb it in the same way. And I think that's why we don't remember so much from school, because we just sat there and we're just fed regurgitated information that is somebody's opinion a lot of the time. I mean, a lot of it is factual, but a lot of it is somebody else's opinion. And we just sit there and are expected to absorb all this information.
But why wouldn't you send your kids to this other school 5 days a week?
They don't have it 5 days a week. But also I wouldn't anyway. They have it 3 days a week, but because they want it, as soon as you go over 2 full days, then they have to have they will then be treated as a school. So they would have like, Ofsted, go in and kind of check it out. So they actually don't want the school system being involved, because then they would have to follow the curriculum.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
So there's just so many questions I have
Also,
around
I like the balance as
Yeah.
well. I like the fact that I get to spend half the time with my kids, and then because also I think I need a break sometimes as well, and because I have a
Yes.
job, so I then try and fit everything into those 2 days the majority of the time as
Which
well.
is why we're here. Well,
Yeah.
Well, as you know, it's
No,
Friday
it's
today.
half term as well. So they're with my mum today. So
Got it.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I think is a misconception around homeschooling is that your kids become isolated
Mm-hmm.
and they become a bit, uncomfortable making conversations and making friends, and they're not.
The complete opposite.
Well, that's what I've heard as well, but I'm just saying that's a conception.
And I personally think it's because when you go to school, you're under an authoritative figure and you're told when you can speak, when you can go to the toilet. You treat adults differently. My children would speak to you as they would their friends because they don't see you as any different than them. They don't think that age makes you shouldn't treat anybody any differently because of their age, basically.
Yeah.
So they would come in and chat to you like they would to their friend.
It's so interesting. And I also think what's really interesting is that when you're at school, you'll be like, can I go to the toilet?
Mm-hmm.
And when you go to university, you don't put your hand up and say, can I go to the toilet? You just leave the lecture room.
Yeah.
And when you go to a job, you're not like, excuse me, can I go to the toilet?
Yeah.
You're just like, you just leave.
Yeah.
And I found that transition weird. Because at what point do I stop asking for permission?
Well, it's really sad because I see a lot of memes. Obviously, I follow a lot of other homeschoolers, and I don't necessarily share this view, but I do see a lot of memes, with a lot of negative views about the school system. But there are comparisons of the school system to prisons. And if you look at the buildings and the way that you have to ask for permission for things, you have certain times, you have breaks for things, everything is set into a certain time frame, and you have to, you have an authoritative figure, everything within that. They kind of compare them, the pair of them.
That is such an interesting comparison. The other thing I've heard people
I
say,
don't necessarily believe that's not my belief.
it's a bit
but
extreme,
yeah,
but it makes
exactly.
kind of sense, if I'm honest, because everything has to be rigid.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to tell you what I saw online, which was, how the hell are you going to prepare them for the real world if you're always homeschooling your kids and mollycoddling them and they can decide what they're going to do? What they're going to do when they have a real job?
I think it's the complete opposite.
Why?
How is school the real world? What can you tell me? What about school? How can you compare a classroom to the real world?
Obedience.
Why should we be obedient? I don't agree with obedience. I don't think. And again, if I look at my adult life, I feel like everything I've decided to do is the opposite of that. It's like, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but whose intention, who wants you to be obedient?
How interesting.
Yeah.
What entrepreneurs aren't born from obedience, are they?
No, exactly.
But we are taught to kind of be obedient because, right, you have to listen to your...
But who does that suit?
Yeah.
And that's part of the kind of bigger question, isn't it, with all of it? They say school came at the same time as the Industrial Revolution, and they wanted to create workers that would fit into the system.
How fascinating.
Yeah.
So there's a deeper rooted thing here that people say. Tell me a bit more about that.
I don't know that much about it. I just know that that's when it kind of started at the same time, and that kids were literally moulded into fitting into this system.
And if you teach children the same education, same ways to be...
You know what you're going to get carbon copies of each other, aren't you? And that's what the world wants. Again, this is like a bit of a rabbit hole that you could
Well, this
get
is a bit of a rabbit hole. Now
yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
What about people who are just... Look, there's going to be people listening to this podcast, because if I was a parent right now, I'd be like, right, that's it. I've already decided after this podcast, I'm homeschooling my kids. Okay? I want to do it. How am I going to fit it around my career? How am I going to fit it around my job? I'm feeling that I want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to send my kids to school, but I don't think I have the patience and the capacity and perhaps the money to do homeschooling. What do I do?
So depending on your financial situation, there are so many other parents in the same situation who want the best for their children. So you child swap, for example. So I might look after your child for the afternoon, and then you would swap and look after, and you would look after mine. Or there's plenty of groups out there. There's a massive homeschool community that is only getting bigger and bigger. So you all just look out for each other. I mean, I'm in a privileged situation where I can afford to have tutors for my children, but at the same time, there are so many parents that just want the best for their children. So we all just muck in.
That is actually a really wonderful point, because I've never thought about that, actually.
Yeah, you just have to really search for, well, you don't have to search for it. There's loads out there on Facebook, but yeah, there's a lot of support out there.
You said at the start of this podcast that you have a competitive element to you. How do you deal with the comparison? Because I guess if you're homeschooling your child, you're creating their own path.
Yeah.
When you're in school, and I've seen this and it's so hilarious, someone will be like, oh, my child only started that like 4 weeks ago, so don't like look at it too much.
It's a real struggle. Is one of the biggest struggles is letting go of the comparisons, I'm not going to lie. But you do just have to let go. And I just look at how happy and grounded my children are. And I think that's what you're going to take through life with you. You're not going to care about these results. Do I meet you and go, what did you get in your GCSEs? No, I meet you and I think she's such a lovely, warm, open, kind person, you know, and that's what shines out. It's not how clever you are.
So true. And how did you have the conversation with Ava and Sufi? Because weren't they like, Mum, why aren't we going to school?
Well, Sufi just went along with it because that's what her bigger sister did.
Okay.
And Ava, I don't really remember. I think we just discussed it a little bit. And I said, we're going to try forest school. We're going to try all these different groups. And she was quite young at the time, so she just went along with it and was quite excited.
What about this theory that your kids will be too attached to you if you homeschool them because they're spending all their time with you? And
I think the opposite. I really do, because they are so safe and comfortable knowing that I am there for them whenever they need to, that they have so much freedom and they just will go off and quite happily. They're very independent and confident. Yeah.
And what about the discipline element as well? Because people are like, how do you differentiate between being a mother and a teacher?
I don't think there should be any, why should there be any difference with a mother and a teacher?
So true.
You know?
Why does the teacher have to be so strict?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm totally honest, my youngest, I'm a little bit concerned because she isn't very good when it comes to kind of listening to instructions. But at the same time, she'll question everything, which isn't a bad thing, but it is very, very challenging as a mother.
Why?
Because I will say,
why?
Yeah, no, honestly.
Prime example.
Yeah, exactly. Because we'll sit down and I'll say, okay, let's spend some time reading about this. And she'll say, I don't want to. And I'll say, well, I think that's maybe what we should do now. And then she'll just say, well, I don't want to right now. Why should I? And so that's challenging, but she's got a good point. So I then have to come around and try and find a way to explain to her how it will benefit her. So it is really challenging to not lose your SHIT.
You can swear on here. This is interesting. So this is, I guess, another point of like, well, your children are just going to run wild because they're only going to do what they want to do and they're just going to want to play all day. I
think we have an innate nature inside of us that is curious about the world, and I think you'll get to a certain age and you'll look around and strive to learn more. But I also think, why shouldn't children play? Says who? Like, why shouldn't they be running around playing at 7 years old?
There was a study that was conducted that if children are playing and then they take an exam or something like that, I heard it on another podcast, by the way, they outperform the children who was memorizing things and then did the exam. Because I do think that in school, all I remember about school is being very tired. Very, very, very tired, very hungry.
Yeah.
At my break time, I was starving. I remember that. I used to be so hungry at my first break time, and then at lunchtime, I wouldn't be that hungry. And then I'd be so hungry at 4 o'clock. Even now, my eating pattern is very weird because I never eat in the morning. I'm not hungry. I've never been hungry when I've woken up. And as a child, my mom would force me to have cereal before I went to school.
And again, then even when you have cereal as a young child, you're literally having sugar and no protein. And there's literally been studies done where children have been given protein for breakfast and then cereal, and their level of concentration has been completely different.
Fascinating, because I used to fall asleep. And then all the time, and I remember it so clearly. And then at 10:30, I'd feel starving, and I would go and buy a bread roll, because that's what the canteen would serve, and like maybe a Galaxy bar from my mate who was selling some chocolates. And then at lunchtime, you would have a meal, and you'd feel so tired.
Yeah,
you're very conscious around your diet, aren't you?
Yeah.
Talk to me about it.
So I think because we had the juice bar, so that actually all originally started. I was really ill when I was growing up, and my dad, after I was in hospital for a few weeks, it was the first time I'd ever had the correlation that diet and health are linked. So I just thought health was medicine and diet was weight. I didn't actually ever think that what you ate could have an impact on how you felt.
Yeah.
So that was my introduction to nutrition, and it just kind of went on from there. Then my brother got really ill, and that's when my sister-in-law and I, who had the juice bar, got into nutrition because we noticed that there was no healthy cafes or restaurants. He was at Guy's Hospital and there was nothing nutritious around. The food that he would be given in hospital was like sandwiches, and there was no nutrient-dense food whatsoever that he would be given. There was nothing around. So that's when it all kind of started. I was then vegan for a while.
Okay.
And I felt really good initially, and I think that was because of the lack of processed food. So I cut out all processed food. I was having like mainly raw vegan diet, so just like fruit and veg and nuts. And then I didn't feel very good after a while. My energy started to, and I'd get a really bloated, gassy stomach, like my skin. Yeah, it was just, I just felt I didn't feel my best. And then I heard about the paleo diet. So I started introducing more meat. And then recently, last year, I heard about a guy called Paul Saladino who follows an animal-based diet, which is mainly fruit and meat. And to me, it made so much sense because I tried, have you heard of a ketogenic diet before?
Yes, keto.
Yeah, so I did that for a while as well. But what didn't make sense to me is why you would cut out fruit, because naturally it looks so appealing to humans. It tastes so good to humans. Why would you not have that when it's been put on this earth for our consumption, and it's everything about it makes you want to eat it? Why should we not eat that? So then when I heard about this diet, I was like, it makes sense. And again, it's a bit like when I said about, the giving birth without pain relief. It's like all of a sudden I heard about this diet that evolutionary wise just made absolute sense.
How interesting. But isn't it a little bit, I don't know much about Buddhism, by the way.
Okay.
But how can you eat an animal-based diet and believe in Buddhism? Or are they not correlated?
It's not really. If you were a strict Buddhist, some wouldn't eat meat, but then I also know a lot of Buddhists that do eat meat as well.
Okay, fine. So the animal diet is really interesting because I've also seen your like parody things on this as well, of being like, yeah, okay, I just eat like, I don't know, crazy, I don't know. You've made some parody stuff, which I find really funny.
Thank you.
The vegan diet, which I find interesting, I had the same thing.
Did you?
I ate only processed foods because I was like, wow,
yeah,
I can have this
Oreos
vegan cheese.
Are vegan? Yeah.
Or as a vegan, ready salted crisps are vegan, so I just ate loads of rubbish. And
bread, and it's like nothing has any nutrients in it.
It's crazy. And actually, it's really interesting because I had a nutritionist on the podcast last week.
Did you?
And I showed her my lunch. And I thought I got a really healthy lunch, by the way. And she was like, where is your 5 a day? And I was like, what a simple question that was like drilled into our heads all the time.
Yeah.
But I got a bag of popcorn. I got a kombucha.
Yeah.
And I got a vegan duck wrap. I thought that was healthy because a vegan duck wrap had 20 grams of protein in it. And when you're getting a meal deal, I just thought like that was a healthy. I thought that was a healthy option. I didn't get crisps,
when you
I
have
got popcorn. I didn't get Diet Coke. I got kombucha. So it seems healthy, but these healthy swaps are like drilled into my head, and I've forgotten the basic. Like, where is the natural food here? She was like, "Where's your fruit?" I was like, "I don't have it." She's like, "Where's your vegetables?" I was like, so simple.
Yeah,
and you just. It's so funny that when I love what you said around intuition and nature and where we originate from. Like, what are the original things
how have we evolved as humans? And honestly, I heard something which always resonates with me, and that's if your great-grandmother wouldn't recognize it, you shouldn't eat it. So all these things that come in packets were not around 100 years ago. So now all this ultra-processed food is available to us, but it's not food. It's not for human consumption.
And I love how you've actually very openly talked about all the different diets you've done. Because I think when we experiment, people tell us that we're so indecisive and we're following the latest trend and we're jumping from one thing to another. But why do we have to stay the same forever?
but why do you, I mean, I post about this regularly. Why do you have to fit in a certain box? So for example, I know this sounds a bit ridiculous, but I know I don't look like the average homeschool mum because I see how other homeschool mums dress, for example. I don't, it's like you don't have to fit in this box. You don't have to say I eat organic food, but then I still order from Amazon. I get my nails done and then, but it's like, but then I still use beef tallow on it's like, you don't have to fit in a box. You can do both. We're all just trying and we're all on our own journey, aren't we?
But how did you get so confident in creating your own path? Because from everything you've said, you're very much like, I'm not following the rules. I'm doing what I want. I believe in myself also, which is a very key thing.
Yeah.
To try something new and to create your own path, you have to have the ultimate belief in yourself that you'll be okay.
And I think you just have to go with your gut. And when things make absolute sense to you.
Your gut is such a powerful tool. And everyone can always tell you that it's not going to work out. Or, it's not going to be right. Like, thinking of your story, if you're about to give birth and someone's like, just take this medicine, otherwise you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
How nuts that you knew, I am going to make it. Because it's your gut.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's like I wasn't in a kind of coherent state at that point to make those decisions, but there was something that told me to question those pills.
How crazy. And you did, and you realised that it was really hallucinogenic.
For a baby to be born with hallucinogenic drugs is mental. To me,
No, I agree. I agree. So talk to me about this animal-based diet.
Yeah.
Because what about the kids? Do they follow the animal-based diet?
No, because I don't want them growing up being paranoid about food. And also they're going to go to birthday parties and everything. I don't want to tell them they can and can't have certain food. So at home, I try and just give them as many nutrients as possible. Yeah. But I don't say you can't have this, because I did that when my eldest was young and I could see the way she would look at other kids having an ice cream or something. And I was like, that's not fair. Yeah. And if we were in a world where that wasn't around, I would be really strict with them. But we are in a world, in the West, where these foods are going to be around them. And I can't do that to them. And unfortunately, they're so addictive, all these foods, that until they have the strength to be able to kind of make those decisions themselves, I don't want them to be told that they can't do something, because I think that's just as damaging as well.
Because I guess we're saying like you're putting them in a box of like, well, you should do this and you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I think someone who's listening to this or watching this now is probably thinking, how do I have that strength to kind of take that first step into either homeschooling or, changing my diet without having any judgment for doing something differently?
I think people will come around to your decisions, and if they really love you, they will let you make those decisions, I mean, it is ballsy. You do have to really take charge. But I've never regretted any decision that has come from my gut. So there's an element of caring what people think. And of course, you don't want to offend anybody. But ultimately, it's your life. And if something doesn't feel right for you, then just don't do it.
That's so powerful. A lot of your stuff that you're talking about is from intuition. Have you always had a good intuition?
I think so, yeah.
I think some people do. I think women especially do.
Yeah.
Because I think I have a very strong intuition as well.
Do you?
Very strong. And I always know if somebody's lying or if someone's like being a bit funny. I'm always like, oh, there's a bit of
something doesn't sit right, yeah.
I just think men don't have that as much. And I wonder why.
Because we're totally different creatures, aren't we? Think of how differently we're built.
Why are we built so differently?
We have to be, don't we, really?
But do you mean physically or like mentally as well?
Both. But if you think of the imbalance, the difference in our balances with hormones and everything, it's like we are completely different species almost.
I don't know anything about that either. Like,
I don't know much about it, but again, to me, this is just the way my brain works. To me, it just makes sense. It's like, well, yeah, of course. It's like when you look back at it's almost breaking things down to make them as simple as possible. And you're like, of course.
It's so
everything is so overcomplicated.
Yeah, you're right. It is very over. But what about, okay, so I think there's going to be people watching this who are going to be like, oh my God, this is so cool. I'm going to start exploring it. And there's going to be people who will be like, this is a bit woo-woo.
Yes.
Do you get that a lot?
Not so much, because I feel like people would just unfollow me if they thought it was woo-woo. I don't. And also people are afraid of offending, so they wouldn't necessarily tell me what they think, but I kind of don't care anyway.
Oh, wow.
If you think it's woo-woo.
Not afraid of offending me at all.
Who's not, sorry?
My audience is not afraid of offending
Oh,
me at all.
really?
No, not at all. They'll be like,
Oh,
this is a
quite
load of bullshit.
lucky.
I'll be like, okay, thank you.
No, I feel like I'm quite lucky. I don't get that much stick on Instagram.
Well, I think it's, this is how I think the world should be. You like something, tell someone. You don't like something, move on with your life.
Exactly.
There is no need for you to tell me and write me a paragraph of how ridiculous you think I am and you're unfollowing me. I don't care.
No, I genuinely don't care.
I really don't care. Like, if you're going to unfollow me, it's okay.
Just do it.
You don't have to send me a message and say, like, I hate you and I really hated what you said here and I don't think I'm going to follow you again. It's like, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine. But, like, we've got into this habit of, like, over-expressing.
Yeah.
Overproducing. Overcomplicating, like you've just said.
Mm-hmm.
And with an animal-based diet, I think one of the things that you talk about is just having everything in, like, a very slow, moderate, like, this is what I'm getting from.
No, but it's just stripping it back, isn't it? Everything, there's nothing that I eat that that doesn't exist on this planet. It's not been processed in any way, shape or form.
So you don't eat any processed foods?
No.
So what about when you go out for dinner?
I'd have steak.
What about if there's not steak?
I wouldn't go somewhere that didn't have steak. So, for example, I went for dinner the other night and we went to a steakhouse and then my friend wanted to leave and she wanted Chinese and I was like, well, I can't eat anything. There's nothing in a Chinese restaurant that I could eat. I did have a little bit of duck, but without the pancake. So I just literally had like duck and the cucumber.
Will you have pasta?
No.
No.
No way.
Pizza?
No.
No.
No, I have not had bread, wheat, pasta for like 3 since 2020.
I couldn't survive.
Out of your face.
I just ate pasta and pizza for like 4 days in Paris only.
How are you so
I
tiny?
love it. I would eat it every day. Every day.
Wow.
Have you ever had a Domino's?
Yeah, I have. Growing up, I used to have like blue wickeds and like whatever. Honestly, I used to eat crap back in the day.
What about a Diet Coke?
Yeah, I used to. I wouldn't now. God, no.
So what about people who say you're too rigid?
I don't feel like I am rigid though.
But not being able to eat anywhere, like you can't eat anywhere that doesn't have a steak. Isn't that a little bit rigid?
Or eat fish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't just eat, so I could eat fish if I wanted to.
Can you eat vegetables?
So at home, I would only have like courgette and butternut squash because they're seen as fruit. But I wouldn't have, but like for example, yesterday I was out with my friends, so I had a burger, but I just didn't have the bun and I had a bit of salad with it. So I would have vegetables in that situation, but at home I wouldn't.
And do you feel a massive difference in your life?
I cannot tell you how different my body, my mind, everything feels. And I started this last January. Then I kind of, because I had my hen do at the end of last year, so I kind of went back to drinking alcohol. And then I went a bit off track with the diet. But I've never
Did you have
felt...
pasta?
No. No, I didn't. No, I haven't. Honestly, I haven't had it in years.
And you don't feel like it?
Don't miss it at all anymore because I see it and I just see how it'll make me feel.
What about a salad? Do you have salad?
It's like I had a bit of salad yesterday, but I wouldn't make salad at home.
So what's an animal-based diet? Tell me what. So you can't have salad, you can't have vegetables.
I had like an omelette for breakfast. Okay. Then I might have like, so we get these burgers that have organ meat in them because that's the most nutrient-dense part of the animal. So I would have that with like courgette and butternut squash roasted, maybe some avocado. And then I'd have like cucumber and kind of fruity salad, but I wouldn't necessarily have like a vegetable. Like I would never have like a kale salad or something.
Why?
Because...
I'm like Sufi, by the way. I was quiet everything. Why?
No, but that's why you're good at your job. Because basically it's in that okay, I'm going to break it down. So if you look at a piece of kale, for example, honestly, does it look appealing? If you think back to how we would have evolved, would we have walked around and gone, I'm going to eat that leaf that's growing out the floor that's kind of really thick and it doesn't particularly taste nice unless you do anything to it? No, we wouldn't. Whether it's the fruit, we would have gone and picked berries or bananas, or the fruiting body of the plant looks and tastes appealing to us, whereas the leaves and stems and stalks aren't. And they actually have defense chemicals in them, which aren't necessarily good for your body.
Wow.
Yeah.
But what about an animal? You wouldn't look at an animal and be like, I want to eat that cow.
Yeah, but as we've evolved, we would have done. If you look back to the hunter-gatherer days, that's how we survived as humans.
But what's the argument for eating meat now? In the sense of like, do you need it to survive, would you say?
No, but to thrive, I believe you do.
Really?
I believe so, yeah.
Why? Tell me that a little
Because of the bioavailability of the nutrients in an animal in comparison to the plant-based options that you have.
Because there is a massive push for plant-based diets at the moment.
Yeah.
Massive. Like, eat more plants. They're the best thing for you. They're from the root of the ground. They're the most natural. It's not processed.
And no, but I agree in that sense. As in, if you're comparing that to a processed, meal, 100%, in comparison to McDonald's, but in comparison to an organic steak, no, I believe that's more nutrient dense.
I think
and it's going to feed your body differently.
I think this is why it's confusing, isn't it? Because there's so many opinions out there. There's so many theories. There's so many analogies. There's so many studies.
Yeah.
But I think one of the best things that you've said, and I think very much aligns to who I've evolved to be, is find what works for you.
Yeah. And
it's
that's
your life. Like, you want to do it, you do it.
And I think that's what I try to do on my Instagram is I show what I do. I don't ever try and tell other people what is wrong or what I think they should do. I just show what I do, and then I get lots of questions about it, and that's kind of, Well,
that's why we don't get hate, because you're not putting people down for being in a particular way. You're not saying like, oh, I'm doing the best thing for my kids and I'm doing the best thing for my
because
body.
we're all learning as well. I didn't start like this. As I said, I worked in Magaluf and was drinking, blue alcohol and eating pizza every night. It's like, no one's perfect, and we're all constantly growing and learning. So you can't put people down.
I find it really fascinating about the whole homeschooling discussion, though. You've convinced me.
Really?
Yeah, for sure. From this one conversation, I'm like, but then I'm like, how am I going to do my job? And like, how am I going to do that? But then I'm also just like, why can't kids just learn by themselves?
You'd be surprised.
I guess there's that fear as well. Like, what if you like they fall over and crack their head?
What do you mean?
If you just let them play and be like, yeah, go on with the day.
Yeah, but they could do that at school.
Fascinating. Honestly, I'm just like, so true. Like, I do think in society, we're so molded and we're so blindfolded, I guess, by the way things should be.
Yeah.
And as you get older, you say things like, oh, I should have this job and I should have this life and I should have this. And it makes sense.
Yeah.
But for the basic things that you're just saying, like your kids will learn to speak, your kids will learn to walk, your kids will learn to read.
Yeah.
I've never thought about it. And I guess I'm not a parent yet, so I wouldn't. But I'm really enlightened by some of the things that you're saying to me.
But why do you need to put that in somebody else's hands?
Yeah, fascinating.
Your health, your child's education, any of it. You don't. Just trust what to do. We all do. How do you think we got here as humans?
Fascinating. Well, thank you for sharing so much with me. And thank you to whoever that told you that you don't need the medication. Was it your dad?
Yeah.
They said, thank you to your dad who planted all these seeds in your head. And now you've planted them all in my head. So,
oh, Shivani, thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you so much for coming.